welcome to your October club. Spring, transitioning into summer. So the theme for this month is wine transitions. Yeah. And I'm going to put like a groovy little transition in here. So transition. So what to drink as the weather is getting warmer, the sun is shining. You still want something with a little bit of structure. We're not quite in that height of summer where it needs to be chilled, acidic. You know, we're all
fresh.
Yeah, fresh. So
and I always say this means like I love to drink a Saunier Rosé during winter. I like to drink champagne out of Magnum. I like to have champagne with longer aging, a bit more voluptuous.
Blanc de Noir, my personal favourite for winter drinking.
Yeah, and even just being out and about with the restaurants this week, I'm seeing the menu changes and I'm thinking about our champagne. So naturally we've been doing a lot of pairing this week with the new spring menus that are coming in for all the restaurants around Australia. And your choice of champagnes is perfect. Now, the champagnes that we've chosen is a lovely rosé with some texture and some power, and a beautiful Blanc de Blanc with,
I'm obsessed
with a little bit of dry, a little bit of wool. So the
rosé for our lovers,
yes,
and a Grand Cru Blanc de Blanc for our connoisseurs.
So wines that are fresh but still have a bit of power as we move from one season to the other, but not quite, as you say, in the height of summer. So let's talk about the first wine, or the first house, Allouchery-Perseval. Never been in Australia before. Now, I think it might surprise a lot of people that there's over 3,000 champagne houses. So there's a lot of research that we need to do on your behalf, and it's a taxing job. Taxing. But we do it with pleasure. Allouchery-Perseval, this house is 4 generations of wine grower. They are located in Iqui, which is in the Montagne de Rams, the little mountain of Rams, which has slight elevation. It's not a big mountain. But in this particular village of Champagne, they specialise in Pinot Noir. And as such, we are bringing you a rosé this month, which has a Pinot Noir dominance. Do we want to talk about Legrass and House first, or do we want to dive into the wine?
I want to dive into this one because one thing that I love, I like a rosé that tastes like a rosé. I like a red wine characteristic, and so this does have 10% Chardonnay, which is a good addition because it gives a little bit of that acid structure. But this is 90% Pinot Noir, and of that Pinot Noir, we have 50% reserve wine, 10% Vin Rouge, so literal actual red wine that's made in a normal Pinot Noir still wine style, and then the remaining 40% of current vintage Pinot Noir, and this has got a 2019 base.
This is what I love about rosé, and it depends on who you are. So sometimes I hear people say, oh, I don't like rosé. There's such a diversity of rosé. Obviously, we've got 2 techniques of making rosé champagne within the region, which in itself is unusual in France. You've got the Saunier method, so 100% maceration technique with Pinot Noir, or you've got the technique of assemblage, where you're mixing a red wine as a red wine and red grapes, potentially as a white wine, so mixing white and red wines together.
The only place in the world where you're allowed to produce a rosé in that manner. Like you can't, a still rosé that you will purchase here in Australia or anywhere else in the world has to be 100% Pinot Noir or other red fruit, basically. It's the only place that you can literally blend red wine and white wine to make a pink wine. So it makes it really interesting. So when you say you don't like rosé, or some people say they don't like rosé, they might be thinking more of that Provençal style rosé, or whereas rosé in Champagne is a very, very different type of wine. And I think a lot of the time if you line up a rosé in a blind tasting and literally cover the glass, you wouldn't know that you were drinking rosé. It brings a lot of beautiful elevated aromatics to the wine, but it still has this wonderful, yummy, acidic texture on the palate.
Which makes it so good for food pairing.
It's the best to pair with
I always
fruit.
say this to my clients. If I'm going to someone's home for dinner and I don't know what the cuisine is or what they're cooking or what's on the menu, I take a rosé champagne. Rosé champagne is made with, as Megan said, an addition of red wine. So Pinot Noir pulled out of the vineyard, crushed, macerated, turned into a light Gamay style Pinot Noir, and then blended into the mix. So what you have is more power, more structure, more depth, and an acid profile, which is what's inherent in the wines of the Champagne region. So you get a much broader appeal in terms of food pairing. It's interesting this one on the nose.
Yeah, so I was finding it is a tart red fruit character, and we were both just debating before we started filming here what that red fruit is. Now, I think it's more that currant kind of like cranberry goji berries, for those of few who've had those sprinkled on salads, but the one that I sort of pick out of this is loganberry, right? Which sounds like, when the hell have you ever had a loganberry? Well, if you ever had meatballs at IKEA,
and survived.
It's a very specific fruit from Sweden that they make jam out of, but it's this red fruit character with this tartness, and that's exactly what I'm getting in this wine, and it is delicious.
It is, and
So delicious.
nose is fantastic, and you're right. It is that goji berry spectrum. When I first put my nose in the glass, when I just opened the bottle, I was getting classic blackberry cherry.
Yeah,
as that.
but
setting.
cherries aren't very tart, like so. It is that it's tart
red fruit.
It's not that typical. So even in a still rosé, if it's a Pinot Noir based rosé, you'll hear people talk about strawberries and cream is a classic rosé characteristic. This is not that. This is more in the acidic red fruit spectrum, which is important sort of difference to note, given it is 90% Pinot Noir.
Pinot Noir. But I also love the powdery dry, almost slightly tannic finish on the palate. It's beautifully balanced, the wine. You've got dimension on the palate, you've got width and length, you've got quite a powerful finish, so the memory of the wine living on, but it leaves this lovely dry, almost powdery coating on the palate, which is very Moorish.
Like you know what I see this with? I see an incredible like pavlova with whipped cream and lots of berries on top with this wine.
So I'm going with a duck with a cherry sauce.
Yeah.
Either would be perfectly fine, or just carry the bottle through to both and have the bottle on your own.
Just drink it. I mean, also I'm just going to continue drinking it.
You could you could have this wine as an aperitif, or you could partner it with food. Equally, it would do perfectly well. Meg's, the second wine that we chose for transitions. Our theme for this month is Legrass. Again, club members, you are getting an exclusive. This is the first time this wine has been in Australia. This is the last of this particular cuvee coming to you.
I got the very, very last bit of this allocation, which we were thrilled. The other thing we were absolutely thrilled about is we had the opportunity to visit this winery when we were on our trade week, a very difficult business week when we were in France recently. We were hosted by the wonderful Jerome, one of the three brothers that make up the family Legrass and Haas, established in 1991. So that is positively brand new in terms of champagne. So they are located in the village of Chouy. Yes, pronounced like the Shui that you might do after a Grand Prix.
I've seen my fair share of those being GP MC.
Yeah. A village known obviously for Chardonnay, and this we loved. We were hosted so wonderfully by Jerome and his wife. And we were blown away by the champagne when we were there, and I'm sorry, but I'm blown away by it again now. It is a Grand Cru.
So there's a couple of villages in the region of Champagne, and there's quite a few, but there's a couple of regions where when they say that name, whether it's Chouy, whether it's Cremant, whether it's Avise, whether it's Le Mesnil-sur-Oger, instantly my ears prick up. And I know that if you've got great varietals, great viticulture, you're going to get a great wine. I mean, really, you're in premium territory when it comes to the Chardonnay varietal. The gentlemen only work with Chardonnay. So we've got varying versions of Chardonnay released from the house. The wine that's coming to you is Le Visions. It is the base of 2020. You've got the base of 2019 from the Allouchery-Perseval. So 2020, very classical year. Very bright, very interesting. For me, immediately on the nose, without knowing what the winemaking technique is, I know that there's barrel influence. I get a little bit of spice. I had ginger, quite interesting notes. But then it settles down into a hallmark, creamy, classic, beautifully round.
I mean,
stunning
classic Chardonnay, classic Blanc de Blanc. Like almost that we were tasting this just prior to filming here with our sales rep Christian, and he's like sparkling Burgundy in the most positive way. Like it is everything I love in a Chardonnay. That tiny bit of eye contact, beautiful acidity, buttery, creamy, toasty roundness, but with this incredibly fresh finish. And you were absolutely right, like that initial kind of spiciness that you get on the nose, but as it's warmed up, as we've been standing here talking, it just keeps growing and getting more delicious.
Melting away.
And melting, and that's a perfect way to describe it. It melts in your mouth.
And that's because it's got, I mean, there's a lot of finesse here. You've got a super fine bubble indicating a little bit of age. you've got a very gentle attack on the palate. Sometimes with Grand Cru villages, and particularly Chardonnay, they need time to soften. I think barrel influence does expedite that process of the softening, of the aeration, of the oxidization, although oxidization is not the correct word here. It really is a softening.
Yeah.
But it is so genteel on the palate in terms of its finish, but at the same time has enormous length, a really beautiful imprint from the wine once the wine is down the back palate, and such a spectacular, stunning wine. So a blanc de blanc with a little bit of power, a little bit of oomph, a little bit of drive.
So that is our October lineup. As we've been asking every month now, this is the problem with filming in our warehouse. It's very busy here, as we are getting into our busy season too. Please jump on the Facebook page. Let us know what you think. I'm not influencing you at all. I want to list these guys. So tell me what. Actually, I love both of them. I want to list these guys. The other thing, I know we struggle to wrap this up, but we will wrap this up now. We like working with people that we like, and it was such a beautiful experience when we visited these guys. They were wonderful. He got his wife to pick up their 2-year-old son, and my son and their son had a play date, so we were able to taste wines. So that in itself is just incredible. They were a really beautiful family. We met Mum, we met his wife. I nearly drove into the garden. I think I backed into their fence, and they still like us. And they make fantastic wines.
I was going to say, and they make fantastic champagne. So we hope you enjoyed these wines for this month.
We've loved this. I think this is a really fun, let's get excited for summer. It's champagne drinking season. It's always champagne drinking season. But let us know what you think and enjoy.
To the next episode.
And look how I finished that.